I just watched a video about the first love theory. It suggests that many people never fully get over their first love. If you can relate, I would like to hear your thoughts. Please share your current age, the age you were when you met your first love, and how often you think about them and what comes to mind when you do. Story 1. Often it is brief. That is in the past now. There is no point in reflecting on what could have been, or you will miss out on what can still be. Story 2. Mine falsely accused me of sexual assault after her new stepfather started messing with her. We had been together for 4 years but never progressed beyond second base because I was somewhat immature, to be honest. I was assaulted at school and suffered broken ribs, which significantly impacted my life. My mother got the police involved, but she backed down after realizing the consequences of such a lie. She ultimately died of meningococcal disease in a hospital because a nurse left her alone for too long. It's sad to think about, as her family deserved better, but it was hard to show empathy after everything that happened. I think about her whenever my life gets difficult. I remind myself that I have experienced worse than this. Story 3. Now and then, she comes to mind. Most of the time, it's because of a scent, vanilla lotion. I am in my 40s and male. Story 4. Her name was Nicole. This was over 20 years ago in middle school. One day, she moved away. Even now, I still think about her and wonder what she is doing and if she is happy with the way her life turned out. Story 5. Daily. I think that's largely due to my low self-esteem and the fact that she was, and may still be, the only woman who ever wanted to date me. I'm fairly certain I would think less of her if I had more relationships. Story 6. I am a 46-year-old male. I spent 17 years with my partner before she had an affair, which led to our split about 9 years ago. We have children together, so I see her and speak with her regularly. She appears in my dreams sometimes, and it is difficult when I wake up. I agree with the theory that after experiencing such hurt, one can love again but never fully or completely, because a part of you may always hold back, fearing that the same pain will occur again. Story 7. I am in my 30s now. I met my first love at 17 and think about them occasionally, mostly with a mix of fondness and moments of reflection. Story 8. Not until now, when she texted me about 7 months ago, even though we broke up 15 years ago. A message out of the blue after 15 years of no contact. She cheated, so she is not worth wasting a thought over. Story 9. My first love was sweet but often lived in her own world. She was also my first sexual partner. Although she was slightly chubby, her body was very attractive to me. I find I remember the intimate moments more than the laughter and time we spent together. She ended our relationship by cheating on me, which hurt me deeply. As a result, I ultimately despise her, but with so many memories of firsts with her, I think of her now and then. It's frustrating. Story 10. Every single day, I think about her. I am 62 years old, and we met on the first day of 7th grade when we were both 12. She quickly became my best friend and partner in crime. We shared many interests, including books, movies, and hobbies. We often skipped school together to go kayaking on the Columbia River, fishing in Fox Creek, or sneaking off to pick berries in the woods. We were inseparable, and after turning 18, we got married. Even after all these years, she is the first person I think about in the morning and the last person I think about before I go to sleep. I reflect on the years we spent together, the love we had, and the heartbreak we endured. As a young married couple from severely dysfunctional families, we hurt each other out of ignorance and foolishness. I often wonder what she is doing. In this moment, I know, because I can hear her moving around in the kitchen making something. Story 11. Quite often, however, it is the one that got away that, even 20 years later, remains a frequent love in my dreams. Story 12. I occasionally think about her, hoping she is content with life. She has faced tragedy with the loss of a son and went through a divorce, which makes me sad. I have always wanted good things for her. Story 13. All day, every day. I'm 37. I met my first love when I was 19. We hooked up as teenagers, dated briefly as young adults, but remained very dear friends throughout it all. He died in 2017, and I'm still very much grieving him, so I think about him more than I would under normal circumstances. He introduced me to my husband, who was also a very close friend of his. As much as I loved him, I always knew we weren't meant to be, so he wasn't the one that got away. He was just an amazing person that I had hoped would be in my life in some capacity forever. He never got to meet my kids, which breaks my heart even more. Story 14. I think about her at least once every couple of days. We broke up early August last year. I won't share all her personal details, but to make it short, we started dating in October 2022 after meeting on a dating app. She actively included me in her life and family, and she loved spending time with me, even if it was just talking in the car while grabbing some inexpensive Mexican food. Her mother liked me and appreciated my old soul. Her stepfather and I started off on shaky ground, but he eventually came to respect and like me. The only thing was that we never had sex. I never questioned why for 7 months because we truly enjoyed each other's company, and I thought it would happen naturally. However, after 7 months, I wanted that desire fulfilled. I recently told her that my STD tests came back clear, and she said the same, so I expected it soon. One night, she called me and revealed that she had gone through sexual trauma as a child and identified as asexual. All the kissing we did and the intimacy we shared felt like a lie. It made me feel like I had violated her after being told she never enjoyed it and only engaged in it to make me feel loved back. We continued dating, and I tried to make it work, but I started cheating as well, purely for physical satisfaction. I never treated her differently, and she never knew. There was only one person I truly wanted to be intimate with, and it was her. We broke up when she told me she didn't think of me romantically at all and felt she didn't have the capacity to feel that way. She ended it to avoid wasting my time. I never spoke to her again and honestly don't want to. As far as values and personality go, she was 90% of what I wanted in a partner. She introduced me to Spider-Man's Spider-Verse movies, despite my previous reluctance to watch them for personal reasons. One song, Calling by Sway Lee, I know by heart and sing almost every day in my car. It was featured in the movie credits and it's beautiful. I can't help but sometimes think about her when I sing it. Do I miss her? Honestly, I don't know. I know I'm better off without her, and I'm not trying to demonize her or portray her as a bad person because she is genuinely good. She just needs to sort out her emotions before she dates again, as that wastes people's time. I guess she was truly my first love. After that, I stayed single for a whole year to focus on myself and move past my general intolerance for how fickle people can be. Story 15. First love or first girlfriend? I rarely think about my first girlfriend. However, I still miss my first love 7 years later. Story 16. Sometimes I think about her with nostalgia. Then I look her up, and at 22, she has 3 kids from 3 different fathers. This makes me feel better. It seems I dodged a bullet. Story 17. I am 32 now and met my first love at 18. I think about them a few times a year, mostly when something reminds me of that time in my life. It is a mix of nostalgia and a reminder of how much I have grown since then. Story 18. As with most things that become popular on TikTok, it is often sentimental and superficial, relying on naive ideas about relationships and romance. You can add theory to any phrase, but that does not make it worth taking seriously. People often reflect on past loves, but usually it is not the first love, and there is no particular reason it should prevent you from fully loving your current partner. My first love was a wonderful girl, but I have completely moved on from her. I think of her occasionally when I see her active on Facebook Messenger or when something reminds me of our time together. But day to day, she does not occupy my thoughts. Story 19. Never got over her. She was the one who got away because I was foolish and young. Recently, we got back together, though. Story 20. I am 64 years old, and my first real love was when I was 20. It was a wonderful 2.5 years. It ended mostly because neither of us had been involved with anyone else, and we were both curious about exploring other relationships. We decided to open the relationship, but we both ended up finding better matches unexpectedly. We are still in the same circle of friends and enjoy each other's company, though we do not tend to get nostalgic, as it would not be helpful around our spouses. I have wonderful memories of us, But to be honest, I think about them rarely these days. When I read this, I remembered great things about her, but that was likely the first time in months. Story 21. First love is an overblown concept to me because, although it was my first, it has not been my greatest love or the one who affected me the most. Maybe I just haven't truly been in love, but first love reminds me that I have the capacity for more than one love. I'm not a paragon of romance who falls for someone and can never love again. Other relationships have meant more to me. My second love was far more impactful, and I find that the more I allow myself to learn about the people I care about before I say those words, the more I love each person in turn. Story 22. I managed to forget about him for a while after learning about his political views. It really turned me off to find out that he supports the same family our country impeached and exiled years ago. But lately, he has been appearing in my dreams, being so charming and caring, almost like he wants to be with me. Yet, we never get a happy ending in these dreams. I always wake up to the harsh reality that he is engaged, and I am trapped in a relationship I cannot seem to escape. Story 23. I'm 27 now, but I was 20 when I fell for her. We knew each other through a club, and then circumstances aligned, leading us to start talking. We had a lot in common, and it wasn't something I had to pretend about, unlike with some other girls. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be, as she was seeing someone else at the time. As for getting over her, I do think about her mostly because we're still friends. Honestly, there are very minimal romantic feelings left, but sometimes I am reminded of why I liked her. When I reflect on how I felt, I remember a moment when we hung out at her place, had drinks, and I slept on a mattress on her bedroom floor, only to wake up to her staring at me in what I perceived as a romantic way. Otherwise, I'd say I've mostly moved on. Story 24. I am now 35, was 15 when we met and 17 when we broke up. I wouldn't say that I think about her longingly, but she was a significant part of my life during an important period and still comes to mind from time to time. I still pass the street where she used to live and the park where we hung out, which triggers memories along with other random thoughts. I can also remember her mobile number from those days. Story 25 quite often, and that was 20 years ago. She stopped communicating with me, a term that wasn't known then, and I've never gotten closure. I'm still sad about it. Story 26. Basically never. It took me a couple of minutes to remember who that first love was. Stop believing the misinformation on TikTok. It is largely manipulative engagement bait, and the short-form content is damaging your attention span. Story 27. Never accept when these types of Reddit questions come up. She did a good job making sure I would want to forget about her by simply being her true self. You could say my first love was an 11-month-long honeymoon period followed by 5 to 6 months of confusion and a mask-off situation. Story 28. Weirdly, the only girl I have ever dreamed about was my first girlfriend. I am in my early 40s and I have had a few girlfriends and a marriage since, but for whatever reason, the dream is always about the first. Story 29. I am 16 years old and still with my first love. She is beautiful, smart, and funny. I have loved her since I met her 6 years ago. We have been dating for a year and a quarter. I just got back from a camping trip with her and her entire extended family. She is everything I could ever want, and I love her with all my heart and am not afraid to admit that. Story 30. Sometimes, it's only if I see or hear something that reminds me of her, like your question or the songs we listened to together. Story 31. I had my first boyfriend at 16 and dated him for a year. I am now 35 and can't remember his last name. I wonder if guys are more sentimental in this regard, or if it's just me. I have had 10 boyfriends, including an ex-husband who is now a co-parent, before meeting my current boyfriend. I don't often reminisce about any of them. Occasionally, I think to myself that I am grateful it didn't work out with them so I could meet my current boyfriend. Story 32. I am 27 years old, and when I was in a relationship with my girlfriend, I was 21. We broke up within 1 year due to long distance. It never worked out for us. I often think about her. Sometimes, when I feel sad, I open our old chat messages and read them. It brings a smile to my face, recalling how good my life was and how happy we were. She was humorous and down to earth. For the past few months, I have been trying to avoid those memories, but they still come to mind. It is okay for me as long as I can find happiness in those thoughts. Story 33. I rarely think about him and seldom check his social media, but I do not miss him at all. I have fallen in love much deeper since my first love. Story 34. I lost my virginity to her, and I couldn't be more satisfied that it was with her. We still talk from time to time. Story 35. I'm 37, and to be honest, I have trouble remembering who that first love might be. Once again, TikTok trends sound completely unconvincing to me. Story 36. Sometimes, I have no idea what happened to her and her family. They just disappeared. Story 37. Once a week, Chinese food reminds me of her. She moved 200 miles away. I have that effect on people. That was 40 years ago. Story 38. Never. I do, however, think about my fiancée who passed away about 10 years ago. She was perfect in almost every way. I miss her. Story 39. Very rarely, and even then it is not really about her. There is no reason to miss her over the woman I married. But there are rare occasions when I am reminded of something that makes me nostalgic for being 16 and feeling those emotions for the first time. Story 40. I met my first love at 17. He was amazing, but I guess people move on. I think about him a lot. The survey was accurate. I am currently in a relationship and still sometimes think about us. Sometimes I really wish he could come back, but I'm not going to force anyone into anything they don't want. The reason we remember them is that they played a significant role in our lives, and breaking up left an impact. Sometimes I feel jealous when people are still with their first love, but that's good for them. Story 41. I recently thought of her. So I looked at her Instagram and discovered she had gotten married in May to a man 30 years older than her. My heart broke, and I ended up blocking her on all platforms. Story 42. I used to think about her often because I ended things very poorly. Once I contacted her and apologized for the way I ended it, I stopped thinking about her. She accepted my apology graciously and is now having a good life. We do not stay in contact at all. Story 43. First love is never forgotten. Second love happens occasionally. A song might play or a movie we watch together might come to mind. Those kinds of memories linger. Story 44. I can still remember her face after 10 years. Meanwhile, there are people I have seen more recently whose faces I cannot remember. Story 45. Never really. In my early 30s, I have had several romantic relationships since then, and I do not have a tendency to dwell on the past. There is no reason to believe that your first love will be more suitable for you than later relationships. If anything, it is often the opposite. I think much of the nostalgia for first love is more about the nostalgia for youth and a simpler life. Story 46. Surprisingly often, given that we dated over 20 years ago, I find myself triggered by the scent of the same perfume. She was the most beautiful woman I have ever been with, but we were definitely not a good match. We shared many intimate experiences, which I appreciate, but I am equally content not being with her now. The main issue in our relationship was her strong Catholic beliefs, although thankfully she quickly left those outside the bedroom. Story 47. He worshipped the ground I walked on. He rode his push bike over 20 kilometers from his mother's house to my house to see me. My mother adored him. He treated me so well that I loved him. Then he and his brother were going to live with their father, which meant changing schools. I figured he was going to end up dumping me for some new girl at his new school, so I took action first to avoid the heartache and ended the relationship. We were in year 6, I think. I broke his heart. I realized a week later that I had made a mistake and wanted him back. He pretended to get back together with me. We slept together for the first time. Then he ended things again, leaving me heartbroken and hurting. We went our separate ways. I next saw him when I was 20 at my mother's funeral. I was at the front talking about her when I looked up and saw so many of my friends, and there he was in the crowd with his son in a stroller. I was pregnant with my first child from my then boyfriend. We spoke briefly. I don't remember much about that day. I then moved to Tasmania for the next 8 years, and when I returned to Perth, we caught up once or twice as friends for a drink. He looked at me and I looked at him, and he still made my heart race and gave me butterflies. He told me again that I broke his heart all those years ago. I replied that I knew I did and that I had messed up. If it's any consolation, the next few guys I was with after him, including the father of my children, all treated me poorly, so karma caught up with me tenfold. Then his girlfriend, the mother of his teenage boys, forbade him from having any further contact with me, and she blocked me on all his social media and phones, I believe, and we've not spoken since. I think of him every day. When we were at school, we wrote letters to each other. I had a whole shoebox, or maybe even two, full of the letters he wrote to me. I dreamed that one day we will find our way back to each other. What we had was strong. I'll never forgive myself for what I did. I forgot to mention that I am now 43, and he is also. Our birthdays are only days apart. And in August, story 48. Now and again, she was from Liverpool, so if someone brings up that city, I remember fondly. But I know the person she was is now gone. We've both grown up. Wherever she is, I hope she is doing well and living her best life. She deserves it. Anyway, I am now seeing someone else from Liverpool after years, and I have to keep reminding myself it's pure happenstance. Story 49. I was in love with my next-door neighbor from ages 11 to 13. Our rooms were across from each other by chance, and it felt like it was meant to be. I couldn't stop thinking about her, and every song I heard felt like it was about us. We were friends during that time, walked to the school bus stop together, sat next to each other, and hung out at school. She sometimes asked me if I liked any girl at school. I would just say yes, but never told her who. At 13, I wrote a love letter and marked the outside with, "For Sam's eyes only," writing that I made it clear it had been her all along in a very dramatic fashion. I avoided her for 2 weeks. Eventually, she reached out to me, and I was incredibly embarrassed. I couldn't look her in the eyes. She was very polite and agreed to a double date. I was over the moon, thinking this was it. We saw the movie Flight Plan. I don't remember anything about the movie. I spent the entire time debating whether it was the right moment to hold her hand. I hesitated and didn't go for it. After the date, we all took the train back home, and at the end, she told me that she liked me but only as a friend. Naturally, I was heartbroken, and the following week, she started dating an Australian boy. The whole year I talked about this. I disliked this boy. He was new to the school and even hung out with my friend group. Everyone thought he was so cool. Then, a couple of months later, my parents announced we were moving to Australia to, no joke, the same suburb this Australian boy was from. I missed out on many other interesting moments in this first love saga, and I often think of her. However, when I looked her up on Facebook about 10 years ago, when I was 21, I saw that she had gained weight. Any feelings I had for her dissipated, and I imagined that if she had chosen me, we would have grown old together, and she wouldn't have gained weight. I apologize if my words upset anyone, but that's how I felt. Her younger sister, though, who is 3 years younger, looked stunning. I've been in love 4 times in my life, but I've never been with a woman I love. All 4 women friend-zoned me, unfortunately, and I haven't been in love in the last 5 years. Throughout my life, I've only attracted women who were available to me and not the ones I truly wanted. So I never fell in love with any of them. Surely one day, perhaps there's a plan for me. Story 50. My first love turned out to be a pedophile and was imprisoned for stalking a 13-year-old schoolgirl. I should have seen it coming when he came with me to my mother's place and commented on a picture of me when I was 11, claiming I looked attractive. He didn't seem bothered when I told him my age. He just laughed. I later discovered he was talking to a 14-year-old girl from the States online. That was 10 years ago. I have no idea what he is doing now or if he is still imprisoned. The 13-year-old girl went to therapy, but I haven't had any contact with her father since it all unfolded. He tried to break into her home, but her father caught him and seriously hurt him. I'm 30 now, and I can assure you I have fully moved on. I was over him as soon as his attraction to young girls became known. I do think about him, but it's not fond memories. It's utter disgust that I was intimate with a pedophile. Story 51. I'm not sure I can even remember her full name accurately. The concept of first love is not as meaningful as some suggest. TikTok is not for everyone. I'm 43. Story 52. She died of alcohol and opiate toxicity years after we went our separate ways. I regret that I never said, I know we didn't part on the best terms, but I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well, and I sincerely wish you the best. Story 53. I found someone who I thought was the one, but I got rejected. Does that count as my first love? Because if it does, I think about them all the time. Story 54. Never. Until you posted this, I thought other moments had a bigger impact on me. Story 55. This song sums up my feelings. Story 56. I am still traumatized by my first love to this day. I met them about 13 years ago, and it has been a challenging emotional roller coaster. Story 57. Only when posts like this mention her do I reflect on it. I am married to my second love, and we have been together for decades. She is much more important. Story 58. I was 9 at the time, and she was my first girlfriend. I think about her almost every day, as she has a unique and lovely name. That was the start of my depression. Story 59. Probably more than I should. It's easy to stop, though. I think it's easy to romanticize and feel nostalgic for the good times. Then I remember the bad. It makes it really easy to stop thinking about that person. Story 60. Once in a blue moon, that woman caused significant damage to my mental health and self-confidence, which is occasionally worth acknowledging in an attempt to grow from it. Story 61. It really depends on how you define first love. The first girl I ever had a crush on, that was very rare. My first girlfriend? Not really. As for my last girlfriend, who I was with 5 years ago and was trying to figure out how and when to propose to, there are times when I can go a few weeks without thinking about her, but then something will remind me, and I find myself thinking about her every few hours. Story 62. Every day, I guess. But it's just a thought. It seems this person exists in a way. There is no sadness or emotion, but I am amazed myself. Story 63. I married and divorced my first love. I still think about it occasionally, especially when I hear a specific song that meant something to us. However, it is not as much as before. Understanding that she never loved me and actually cheated on me was key to letting go. I would not take her back, not even for $100 million. Story 64. Occasionally, like maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the year, she had a hard time figuring out who she was back then, and I didn't help matters. Looking back, we were a terrible fit and would have ended in divorce pretty quickly, but I hope she found happiness. She was into cosplay as a coping mechanism for some of her issues before it really became popular, so I like to think she's living her best life these days. Story 65. Unfortunately, it happens too often. I drive near her parents' old house almost daily, and it reminds me of the time spent there. I fell hard for her. Story 66. Daily since I married her, though it was the second time around with a few other ladies in between, I have come to see that her craziness is the best craziness. Story 67. I think about her occasionally, perhaps once a month. We met when we were 14 and were friends until the end of our junior year when we started a relationship. I am currently 26 and sometimes reminisce about those simple times, wondering if things would have been different had I made other decisions. She is married and just had a child, and I hope she is happy with her life. Story 68. I can't remember the last time I thought of her until I read this question, so I'll say maybe once every few years for 2 seconds. I don't even remember her name. Story 69. I just saw my first boyfriend at a friend's wedding last weekend. I didn't feel any longing for him. I only wish the people I have loved the best in their lives well. Just because we didn't work out doesn't mean I don't want their lives to bring joy. Story 70. I experienced my first love at 16 and my first significant relationship at 17. I still think about both of these early loves. The first was an intense and all-consuming teenage love, where I believed we were soulmates and that I could never love anyone as much as I loved her. She was the first girl I genuinely pursued. I saw her at the food court in the mall and felt that instant attraction. I approached her, asked her out, and to my surprise, she said yes. resembling a pivotal scene from a 2000s teenage romantic comedy. The second was my girlfriend after her, whom I met on a social networking site. We were together for almost 3 years, and our relationship was formative for me. I learned a lot and we grew together. I still think about her sometimes, even though we haven't talked or seen each other in years. I often reflect on her more than my first love, primarily because there are many aspects of my wife that remind me of her. Because I ended up marrying someone who resembles that formative teenage love, I find it intriguing how subconscious elements influence our choice of partners and the people we fall in love with. Story 71. I have had a few different first loves, each one representing a new type of love. Everyone can teach you something unique. Story 72. I would say a few times a month. It's a strange feeling. I think part of the reason is not that I am not over her romantically, but rather that she was cruel to me at points in the relationship. It's almost like having flashbacks, similar to being bullied at school or in a workplace. You have those moments where you remember and ask yourself the unanswered question of why me once again. Story 73. Very rarely, thank God. She was a bad-tempered and emotional child who verbally and physically abused me. The last time I checked on her, I found that she was still single. This gave me immense relief, not because I was happy that she was alone, but because she was not ruining the life of someone else. Story 74. Reading the comments makes me think that my first love was never really my first love. I don't believe I've experienced love like most people. I just became attached. Story 75. I am 36 years old and I do occasionally talk to her brother. We worked together for about 6 years after the split. Her father was my boss, her mother worked in the office, her older brother was another apprentice, and her younger brother helped on weekends while I was the only other person working there. During that time, we were awful to each other until we eventually sorted it out. I think because of the time we spent together, we were able to achieve full closure. I do not have any lingering feelings for her. She seems to be doing well and is still with the man she dated after me. I am happy for her. To be fair, this year I started dating the first girl I kissed. I had a crush on her on and off throughout school, and she was my best friend. So, in a way, I ended up with my first love just 23 years later. Story 76. When I think about her, I wonder why I made so many compromises and sacrifices only to lose in the end. They say to have no regrets, but I regret allowing myself to be changed for her and being with her for so long. Compromising and still losing hurts a bit more. I am at peace with it. We were young and naive and she was struggling. I forgive myself and her. I do not look back fondly. I focus on the present and future and am grateful for my spouse, my children, and the life I have built. Story 77. I stayed 6 years with the woman. I think of her only when I seek some variety in my intimate moments. Story 78. I am 26 years old and think about her twice a day at least. The brief version: we met at 13 years old and studied at the same school. Sometime later, we started liking each other, but neither of us took the first step. At 17, I moved to another city to study, and we lost contact. At 19, I went to the military for 2 years. After my discharge, I returned home and started working in my family business. During this time, she got married and finished college. This year, she commented on something on my Instagram, and we started talking. A few months later, we began dating. We dated for 2 months, and she broke up with me via text. We live 5 minutes from each other, saying she needed time to find herself. Now I have insecurities and a bike. As I mentioned, this is the brief version. I always thought she was the one, but it is what it is. Story 79. Our eyes met across the crowded hat store. I was a customer, and she was a playful haberdasher. Oh, I pursued her, and she withdrew. Then she pursued me, and I withdrew, and so we danced. I burned for her, much like the burning I would experience during urination soon after. Story 80. I think about him a few times a week. He used to be more. I was 21 at the time, and we stayed together for 8 years. I loved him very much, but it fell apart in a terrible way, with lots of cheating and lying on his part. In return, I became very bitter. We had many good times, and I wish things could have been different. but that could never have happened. He was who he was, and there's no changing that. Story 81. Almost never. It's strange because it was real love, and we shared nearly every intimate milestone with each other in a gradual process. I remember the one that got away. It was mostly infatuation, but might have been love. I'm unsure and still think about her constantly. I recall the wildest experiences in bed, which were almost regular. Lastly, there is my wife, who is amazing. I plan to spend the rest of my life with her. It is real love. I'm absolutely infatuated with her, and she brings a joyful and healthy amount of excitement to our intimate moments. Story 82. I don't like to think about the past. Yes, we were 15 and we knew it was not going to work long term. I saw her last year and felt nothing. I said hi and went on my way. Nothing more, nothing less. Story 83. Occasionally, not in a romantic way, I attended his mother's funeral last year. I hadn't seen him in 20 years, but I still have respect. Story 84. I don't really think about her unless the subject of romantic life comes up, but I still have her on Instagram, and I'm grateful she's doing really well in life. We are both in our 30s now, but we met at 13. She's now dating a transgender woman, but I don't know what her sexual orientation is. I am a straight woman now. Story 85. It's hard for me to say who my first love is, but I would give anything if I had spent the last decade with any of my exes instead of being alone. I think about them all fondly. Story 86. Average once a week, sometimes daily, she was a real soulmate. But she wanted a child and I wasn't ready. I have since talked to her, seen her husband, and met their beautiful daughter. I know we made the right decision. Gratitude is such a better filter. Story 87. I know this is asking a lot, but I'm 17 years old and I have been in no contact with him for the past month. I still think about him frequently. Story 88. Not unless a story involving that time period comes up. I think about my former wife more than I like to admit. Story 89. I am 24, and my relationship with my first love ended 3 years ago. I think about her every 2 or 3 days. Story 90. I often think about him and how I didn't realize that some men could be so disappointing, as he was genuinely a good person. I created problems out of nothing due to my inexperience. I am happy that he is content because he deserves it. However, I sometimes wish we could meet now that I have more understanding and see if we would be compatible. Story 91. Quite often, I have to get out of bed in the morning without waking her up while getting ready for work. Story 92. Whenever I see couples together visiting places we once went to, I find myself reflecting while alone with my thoughts. This past Friday, I went to Coney Island with a few friends and watched the final fireworks show of the year. I began to zone out as memories flooded in. My best friend came and sat next to me to check on me. She was the only other woman in my life who cared for me the way she did. And now she's gone, alive, but married to someone else. Story 93. I still keep in touch occasionally. In hindsight, she was probably the love of my life. We met in high school and had great chemistry. We got along well. We were together for 3 years and friends for 5 years before that. However, being young, I was approached by other women frequently and wanted to explore those relationships. As a result, I broke her heart and ended our relationship. Now, looking back, it wasn't worth it. Story 94. Not my first love, but a certain ex of mine. I thought about that and realized that I don't really miss her. In fact, despite being quite beautiful, she was also very ugly inside, if you know what I mean. What I miss was the circumstances, that particular moment of my life, and she was part of it. Story 95. Certainly. I met her in a youth group while in middle school. We became intimate at a young age and had a tumultuous relationship for approximately 10 years. Now, we are both married to other people, and I have not seen her in about 10 years. Story 96. I return to those memories more often now that life has unfolded. I am 42 years old. My first kiss was at 7, and I still think about him. My first love was at 11, and I often reflect on him as well. Even though they were both young, I see both of these individuals on social media. Sometimes, I notice echoes of the past and find myself in tears. But that's life. Story 97. I am over him, but I sometimes reminisce about the depth of our connection. I didn't know it then, but I have chased that feeling since. I also realize how much he set standards in my life. I don't have romantic feelings, and we would never have worked long term. We grew into such different people. However, he crosses my mind every couple of weeks to a month. I should mention that I am single, so I imagine it may be more frequent now than if I weren't. Story 98. Fairly often, I guess, but briefly and at random. That was back in junior high and high school, and we are in our mid-20s now, so it's not like we are the same people we were. We would never get along like that now, and we both know it. Plus, she is kind of married. Still, we are on good terms. She made a point of offering to help me find a job at one of the charities she works with when my grandfather passed. And if she or her husband ever showed up at my door needing something, I would happily go out of my way to help them. She is still attractive, too, the last time I saw her. Honestly, I think the significance is less about how often I think about her and more about how she set the standard for the women I am attracted to. Even now, I am drawn to less traditionally feminine, artsy girls with obvious mental health challenges. Story 99. We broke up 20 years ago. I think about her once or twice a year, usually when I'm reminiscing about my hometown or that time in general. We dated from my freshman to sophomore year, and she was a significant part of that experience. I remember how my friends are girlfriends, and I would pile into a beat-up old Dodge Caravan and cruise around getting into mischief. Story 100. She comes to mind when I reflect on how I have changed over the past few years. As the person I am now, I would have ended things much sooner, but it took making those mistakes to gain the understanding I have now. Story 101. My ex? We had some good times, but I honestly don't think much about her. The last year was so shockingly bad that I borderline hate her. Story 102. I think about her very rarely these days. It's been 16 years. When I do think about her, I recall the time I spent with them fondly. I do not yearn or wish it could be different or that it was better than any love since. It was simply a good time. We were too young and it was too much. I believe we grow up, and the first love is intense and often codependent. Many people reminisce about it through rose-tinted glasses. I recognize that codependency is unhealthy, so I am glad I am no longer in that intense first love type of relationship. Story 103. I still do. I met her at 12 or 13. I had a long dream about her last night. I think about her a couple of times a year otherwise. Story 104. Not terribly often. We were young and both in toxic environments, so we took it out on each other in unhealthy ways. We were only teenagers, so things happen. I have my forever love in bed next to me. That's the love I think about daily. He has seen me through so much over the years and remains a constant, dependable source of love and comfort. On my worst days, he is there with no judgment, just hugs and cuddles. Not to mention, he helped me bring two wonderful little boys into this world. Story 105, maybe 2 or 3 times a year in that context. I still see her occasionally as we have mutual friends. I met her at 17 and we broke up when I was 21. Story 106. I met her when I was 18, home on leave with a friend who grew up just a few miles away. Once I got discharged, he and I became co-workers and roommates, allowing me to see her more often. However, I was so introverted that thoughts of anything between us were, at best, fleeting. Then one day, I stopped by her workplace, and as I was leaving, she asked, "Are you ever going to ask me out?" Put on the spot like that, I replied, "Sure. How about tonight?" Thus, my first date came to be. I was 24, she was 26. We both fell hard for each other. A few months later, she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3B. She started chemotherapy and radiation, and we became even closer. When she finally beat cancer, we were ecstatic. However, on my way to my first interview for an X-ray technician job, a kid ran out in front of me, and I hit him while riding my motorcycle at 55 miles per hour. I spent a month in the hospital. Without her, I don't know if I would have ever recovered. We moved in together shortly after my discharge. I asked her to marry me a few months later, and the best time of my life began. On December 2nd, 1987, she unexpectedly died in my arms, likely due to complications from her treatments or the hip replacement she had due to the radiation. I began a descent into darkness. I considered suicide many times over the next couple of years, but I knew she would never forgive me if I followed through. Almost 15 years later, I met a woman who accepted me as the flawed man I am. We have been married now for 23 years. Rest in peace, Kimberly K. Speakman. You will never be forgotten. Story 107, it depends, to be honest. Firstly, what do you mean by first love? Do you mean our first not-so-serious girlfriend from around 8 to 12 years old, or the first official relationship at 16 to 18? If you meant the first one, I don't think about her often, but she's definitely there just chilling in my mind. I was about 8 or 9, maybe pushing 10, I can't really remember, but I was young. I do recall details about her, like her long, wavy brown hair and freckles that crossed her nose. I remember one day we shared our first kiss. The playground was fairly empty, so we went behind the small playhouse. I pushed her against the back, and we just started kissing with tongues. Now that I think about it, we shouldn't have been that forward at that age. The next day, we had some work to hand in about the London fire. While we were in line, she made a joke that I can't fully remember, but it involved some playful banter. We both looked at each other and giggled. About 1 or 2 days later, she was never to be seen again. I miss what we had, but every now and then I try to find her on social media. Though I haven't had any luck. It has been about 7 to 8 years, so she has probably changed a lot and I might not recognize her. If you meant my first official serious relationship, I don't think I will ever forget her, to be honest. Since April 5th, we started going through a really bad phase, and about a week or 2 later, she broke up with me. The love of my life just gone. Her letter is carved into my thigh, and when it fades, I redo it. I still have all the pictures, videos, and voice notes, a huge 5-foot teddy bear in my room, and the book she got me into reading. I think about her a lot, and I'm trying my absolute best not to let it consume me from the inside out. Story 108. I remember it quite clearly. We were in 5th grade, and she had just moved in from another state. I had a crush on her at first sight ever since, but I never really had the courage to tell her, as she was more of an acquaintance, and we didn't have any friends in common that gave me a way to talk to her. I had a chance meeting with her at the train station when we were 19, and for some reason she talked to me and we really hit it off. Unfortunately, she had a boyfriend at the time and I wanted to move on, but I couldn't. I dated another girl during that time too, but I broke it off because it wasn't fair to her that I still had feelings for someone else. 3 years later, they broke up and we had another chance meeting. I thought it was a chance encounter at the time, but it turns out she was actually intending to bump into me by going to some of the places I frequented, and we started talking again. Now we're in our early 30s, married with 2 beautiful children. I'm not certain if you can really call it love when I first saw her in 5th grade because I was a child and probably didn't know what love was, but she was all I ever thought about until now, where I know for sure I love her to bits as my wife. Story 109. I met my first love in 7th grade. Things never aligned for us to date. I used to think about her, but once I graduated from college, I saw what she was doing on social media, and we would not have been compatible long-term. Story 110. Every now and then, we had 2 stellar years followed by 3 years of difficulties. We were too stubborn to just call it quits. It ended after she cheated. I am happy it ended because I am now married to a fantastic woman. Story 111. Can't remember who my first love was. I recall a few girls I had a crush on, but I don't think or feel anything for them anymore when I think about them. Story 112. We met in high school, started dating in October 2009, and broke up in April 2011. We follow each other on social media, so I know a little about what has happened in his life since then. He comes to the city I live in occasionally, and I always hope to see him or run into him to catch up in person. He has a child now too. His nostalgic, young love, first love. Story 113. I am 31 and married now, and I rarely think of her. We dated for 4.5 years from high school into college. I definitely thought we were going to get married, to the point where I was her parents' future son-in-law. However, there were issues in the relationship, and she was a toxic manipulator who negatively impacted my life. She usually pops into my mind when something reminds me of her, often a smell or an event. However, I got over her a long time ago. I do not regret the time we spent together. I do not regret breaking up with her, and I am truly happy that I did not marry her. 3 months after she broke up with me, I met my second love, who eventually became my wife. I do not dwell on the past, although she still believes I do. She has a child now and is divorced, and from time to time she likes a story of mine or sends me a message or calls. I do not respond, and it is clear that she is not over it. Her friends, with whom I still have contact, have told me she has never moved on from our relationship. She left me because I wasn't giving her what she needed and found someone else. It must be incredibly painful to see me giving someone else what she so desperately wanted. Tough luck. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.